The Saints Row reboot of 2022 was highly anticipated by both long-time fans of the franchise and new players who were curious to see how the game would reinvent itself for a new era of gaming. However, the final product fell short of many expectations and was met with widespread criticism. In this video, I won't be discussing the entire franchise or any of the previous installments. Instead, I will be focusing specifically on the Saints Row reboot. I believe there are 7 major reasons that contributed to its downfall. So, let's dive deeper into all those aspects, from technical shortcomings to disappointing design choices. The most immediate and glaring problem with the Saints Row reboot was its sheer amount of bugs and technical issues. Almost from day one, players reported a series of problems that severely hindered the gameplay experience. The game was riddled with bugs that affected everything from mission completion to simple movement in the open world. Players reported characters getting stuck in geometry, missions failing to progress, and frequent crashes that made it impossible to continue playing without restarting the game. The enemy AI often malfunctioned, making combat sequences feel lackluster. Enemies would sometimes just stand still, completely ignoring the player or running into walls, which broke the immersion of the gameplay. The performance of the game was another major issue. On previous consoles, players encountered frequent frame rate drops, long load times, and overall poor optimization. Even on more powerful hardware like the PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X, the game still struggled to maintain a steady frame rate, making the combat and driving sequences feel choppy and unpolished. Despite several patches that have been released to address these problems, the sheer volume of technical issues left a bad taste for many players, especially those who bought the game at full price expecting a more polished experience. When it comes to gameplay, Saints Row 2022 felt like a relic of the past. While open world games have evolved significantly over the years, this reboot seemed to cling to older, outdated mechanics. The gunplay and hand-to-hand combat were particularly criticized for feeling stiff and unresponsive. In a gaming world where titles like Grand Theft Auto 5 or Red Dead Redemption 2 offer fluid and dynamic combat, Saints Row fell short. Aiming felt imprecise and there was little weight or impact to the weapons, making firefights feel more like a burden than an exciting part of the game. Mission design in Saints Row quickly became monotonous. Many of the tasks involved basic fetch quests or killing waves of enemies without much variation or creativity. There were few memorable set pieces or standout moments, making the campaign feel like a slog rather than an engaging adventure. Compared to other open world titles released around the same time like Elden Ring or Horizon Forbidden West, Saints Row felt extremely dated. The lack of innovation was evident in everything from the driving mechanics to the lack of meaningful side activities. There was little evolution from the gameplay mechanics that had been seen in the earlier titles of the series. The sound quality in the Saints Row reboot was widely criticized as a major letdown. Many players experienced inconsistent audio levels, with certain sound effects being too loud while others like dialogue were too quiet or muffled. This made it difficult to enjoy the in-game conversations and cutscenes. The voice acting also suffered from poor mixing, where background noises were powered key moments. Additionally, the lack of polished and environmental sounds and combat audio diminished the immersive experience, making the overall sound design feel rushed and unfinished. These issues severely impacted the game's overall quality and player enjoyment. The Saints Row series is known for its over-the-top action, crude humor, and chaotic energy. However, the reboot struggled to balance these elements effectively, resulting in a game that felt like it didn't know what it wanted to be. One of the main complaints from players was that the humor in the game felt forced and often cringy. The jokes were frequently immature or awkward, failing to capture the witty, bold style of humor that fans loved from previous installments. Instead of delivering the sharp, satirical edge that Saints Row 3 and 4 were known for, the reboot's humor came across as trying too hard to be funny, but often falling flat. The tone of the game was another source of frustration. The reboot seemed unsure whether it wanted to be a grounded, serious narrative or a wild, cartoonish action game. In the end, it didn't excel at either. The story lacked the emotional depth or stakes needed for a serious approach, but it also didn't embrace the absurdity and chaos that made the earlier games in the series stand out. For many players, a good open world game needs compelling characters and a narrative that draws them in. Unfortunately, Saints Row delivered neither. The story in the reboot was criticized for being generic and uninspired. It centers around the main character and their friends trying to start their own criminal empire. But the narrative lacked the urgency, drama, or high stakes needed to keep players invested. There were no twists, no major surprises, and no memorable moments that stuck with players after the credits rolled. The cast of the characters, including the player's crew, failed to make a lasting impression. In past games, characters like Johnny Cage and Kinsey Kensington became fan favorite thanks to their distinct personalities and humorous interactions. In contrast, the reboot's characters were often described as shallow, annoying, or forgettable. They lacked the charisma and personality that previous Saints Row characters had in abundance, making it hard for players to care about them or their story. Open world games thrive when the world feels alive, dynamic, and filled with interesting things to do. Unfortunately, St. Eliso, the setting of Saints Row, was anything but. Players quickly noticed that St. Eliso felt empty and devoid of life. NPCs in the city lacked variety and behavior, making the world feel more like a static backdrop than a living, breathing environment. There were few random events, little in the way of interesting side activities, and a general lack of detail in the world design. Unlike other open world games that offer countless ways to interact with the environment, for example Red Dead Redemption 2 or Watch Dogs, Saints Row didn't give players many ways to engage with the world around them. There were no meaningful interactions with the NPCs, and the activities that were available felt repetitive and uninspired. As a reboot, Saints Row was expected to bring something new to the table, but it largely failed to innovate in any meaningful way. The game overall design felt stuck in the past. Open world games have come a long way since the early 2010s, with developers constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible in terms of immersion, mechanics, and storytelling. However, Saints Row felt like it hadn't moved forward. Many of the game's features felt like rehashed versions of mechanics that were introduced in earlier titles, with little effort to modernize them or add anything new. The reboot was seen by many as a missed opportunity to reinvigorate the franchise. Instead of pushing the series forward, it felt like the game was content with simply retreating old ground. Features that could have made the game stand out, such as destructible environments, deeper player choices, or more advanced AI, were either missing or poorly executed. One of the final nails in the coffin for Saints Row was how it was marketed compared to what players actually got. Leading up to the game's release, the marketing painted Saints Row as a fresh and exciting reboot for the franchise. Players expected something that would honor the series' roots while bringing in modern sensibilities and improvements. However, the final product didn't live up to the expectations, leaving many fans feeling disappointed, even though the first trailer was also a very bad experience to watch. Perhaps the biggest complaint was that the reboot didn't feel like Saints Row at all. It lacked the chaotic, over-the-top nature that made the series unique. Instead of doubling down on the anarchic fun and absurdity, it felt like the game was trying to appeal to a broader, more mainstream audience, especially the teenagers, losing much of the franchise identity in the process. In conclusion, while the Saints Row reboot had some potential, it ultimately fell flat in many critical areas. From the abundance of technical issues to the weak story, dated mechanics, and unengaging open world, the game failed to deliver the exciting, modern reboot that fans were hoping for. It stands as a cautionary tale about the challenges of reviving beloved franchises and the importance of maintaining the core elements that made them successful in the first place.